Greetings, America. Welcome back. Another episode of Let's Talk. So many things going on in the world. If you have the internet or television, I'm sure in some way, shape, or form you're seeing it all. It's almost relatively impossible to tune out. Um, I could take the easy way out and talk about that kind of stuff, which to some degree could be fun. I have a very humorous, sarcastic side. I just haven't had a chance to explore it in this platform yet. Um, Before I get to my topic of today, I'm going to take kind of a long roundabout way because perhaps like many people, that's how my brain works. Is I can't go in a straight line. Unless I have a script or something, I can't go in a straight line. So, um, with everything going on, uh, my wife posted something yesterday that really kind of sobered me up, if you will. Yesterday, about yesterday was about the sixth anniversary of when my son Logan was taken back to the hospital for what would eventually become his last time being home with us, his last day in school, the last time he would ever be admitted to a hospital. Now, for whatever reason, I think my wife was sharing it as part of her memories and her feed, so I was unable to share it. So we're coming up on that time of year where I apologize if I seem distant or any other type of attribute or adjective, but we're coming up on that time of year where 6 years ago we started down a path that ultimately would conclude with not just me retiring from the service, but my wife and I eventually losing a child, which, uh, in my personal opinion, is an extraordinary event for people that are rather unextraordinary. Um, you know, Parents are not supposed to outlive their children. While I have unfortunately had the distinct privilege and honor of serving with many a patriot in uniform who did not outlive their parents, what I've learned in life is it's wrong to make a comparison. It's wrong to make a measurement. I reflect back on my time spent at the Ronald McDonald House in Chapel Hill, where there was no shortage of parents that wanted to spend time literally comparing who had it worse, which I found disgusting. And that was, and the type of people that were doing that, and whether or not they fell into a category, a stereotype, if you will, um, which coincidentally also had a major part to play in my political journey. So to try to make the comparison where the parents of those men and women I served with who perished on active duty as a result of their service, to try to make the comparison that the losses are different, I won't do that. Just like I may disagree, but people who have a hard time dealing with miscarriages, where there is conception of a child and then something happens and the mother is not allowed to bring it to term. So I won't get into that. I have my difference in opinion on that, but it is what it is. Um, so obviously, lots going on in the news with executive orders and decisions being made, and a portion of the country is in favor, a portion of the country is not in favor, and I believe there's another portion of the country that just doesn't care, whether it's age, demographics, what's going on in your life. But it brings me to the point of Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And there's many different ways you can frame that and say that. Like actions have consequences, so on and so forth. Be careful what you wish for. Um, and it brings me to a point where I reflected upon something I watched during the Christmas time frame. Watched, more importantly, I listened to, and it was Eddie Gallagher, the former Navy SEAL, who told his story of what took place. And I do apologize, my son's dealing with the dog, so if you can hear him in the background. Um, so, long story short is Eddie Gallagher had what amounted to a personality conflict, a personal dispute with some junior members of his team. and another SEAL, Jocko Willink or Willen, I can't, Jocko. He talks about this concept of extreme ownership, and that's kind of going to frame what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes, real quick. Um, when I listened to this interview with Eddie Gallagher, the main theme that I got out of it was he was in a leadership position where he was put in charge, and there were some juniors or subordinates underneath his charge that had a disagreement with him, whether it was personal, whether it was professional, a combination of the two. There was a disagreement. So it had obviously reached a culminating point for the junior Navy SEALs where they decided they wanted to take action and they wanted to lash out. Where I can only assume they had an immediate goal, which was some temporary yet immediate satisfaction. We just don't want to work with Chief Gallagher. We just don't want to deal with Chief Gallagher. Um, but as the saying goes, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Actions, decisions, or choices have consequences. Thinking about the long term, the second and third and fourth and fifth order effects, where it goes into that mindset of playing chess, where, good chess players think about 6 or 7 moves ahead. If I do this, what will my opponent do? And then what will I do? And then what will he or she do? So, you know, taking into consideration the consequences of your actions. And admittedly, I'm somewhat ashamed, but I've been guilty of it. I myself have been guilty of partaking in that. I dislike someone and I want some immediate satisfaction. So, you know, whether it's an accusation or whatever the case may be, and I never stop to think about the long-term consequences of those actions. And specifically, let's frame that in the context of a job, like in the military. What always seems to be neglected is whether the individual that is disliked can physically do the job. If he or she can do the job, if he or she has done what is necessary to earn their paycheck, you know, is that a yes or a no question? Because ultimately, what you're attempting to do without knowing it is you apparently just don't want to deal with this person. You don't want to, that's just it. You don't want to deal with them, whether it's work with them, whether it's personal, professional, whatever the case may be. You don't want to interact with them anymore. And your immediate satisfaction is to no longer interact with them as much as possible. Yet, you may not consider the follow on actions as a result of your decision. So, when we go back to Chief Gallagher, the Navy SEAL, these junior SEALs made some allegations of inappropriate conduct that began a domino effect. And one of them even admitted to Gallagher, I had no idea, like they went to go visit him in the brig. I had no idea this thing was going to spiral out of control as it did. The the follow-on actions were not my intent. I just didn't want to work with you anymore. That's it. Which I don't know how the SEAL community works, but perhaps there was a different route that they could have taken to be like, hey, look, it's just not working. Perhaps there's a different team because they completed the deployment. And I wonder how many of us have gone through life like that, where whether we've been the victim of it, where we had a disagreement or a dispute with somebody, whether we knew about it or we didn't know about it, but effectively we were doing our job, let's say, because I think the job market is where it potentially pertains the most, is whether or not the individual is doing what is required of them, what is necessary. Have they broken any actual laws? Have they violated any particular policies? Or is it just a simple fact that you don't like them and you're afraid that because of your dislike, you're going to escalate things? That is a very mature disposition. You are not required to like anybody. You're not required to agree with anybody. But a very mature person will recognize you have a severe disagreement and perhaps it's not optimal if we work together, because I may eventually reach a culminating point where my emotions get the better of my rational decision making process and then I do something irrational. And I think that's what happened with Chief Gallagher. Was An irrational decision was made based on emotions, and as the story unfolds, it sounds like everybody who got involved against Chief Gallagher, rather than, like Jocko would say, extreme ownership, rather than owning up to their mistakes, rather than owning up to the adverse consequences of their actions, which may not have been intended, as Chief Gallagher tells his story, the whole thing unfolds to the point where there was a tipping point where the people involved, whether the accusers or the ones taking the accusers seriously, could have backed off, kind of did a hey, we're sorry, or in, for those of us that deployed overseas, a gomenasai, where they could be like, hey, my bad, our mistake, we were operating under these assumptions based on this information. Now that we have all this new information, we may have overreacted, we're terribly sorry. That was one route. Apparently in Eddie Gallagher's case, it went a completely different route where they doubled down, where, well, we've already gone full retard. We don't feel as though we can back out of this, so we need to double down and get even dumber. Now, admittedly, I'm assuming there's a lot of information I'm lacking, but the story kind of remains the same. Essentially, leadership was involved. They took the accusations seriously. They acted upon the accusations, but they may have overacted or overreacted, and rather than essentially admitting to a mistake, they basically doubled down and they went down swinging. This whole thing went to court and everything, where essentially Chief Gallagher was exonerated on like 99 of 100 charges. They got him on a technicality of one thing, but you know, because the people involved felt as though there was too much mud on their face, they had to double down and go for broke. Where potentially they would have levied 99 accusations out of 100 against a man who was proven innocent. And I can't help but wonder how often that happens, whether in our personal lives, our professional lives, or even in politics, because actions have consequences, and those consequences may not be what we intended. The most recent things going on right now that's gaining a lot of attention is either the executive orders by the current president, Joe Biden, to basically stop this Keystone XL pipeline, which would, from what the internet is saying, make us relatively independent, energy independent. In other words, we can essentially provide our own petroleum products where we wouldn't have to import them. So then, of course, that snowballs into, well, that's because the Democrats get all kinds of kickbacks from, these outside companies outside the U.S., where the Republicans get kickbacks from inside the U.S. companies, and all this slanderous stuff that goes back and forth, in which case it really makes you wonder, okay, in theory, we elected you to represent us. Does this effectively represent us? In which case, when you go back to that whole concept of actions have consequences, Newton's third law, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, it makes you wonder. There's a portion of people who are the pro-Democrat side of the House. There's a portion of people that are the pro-Republican side of the House. And there's a portion of people that are somewhere in between, where they like a little bit from both parties on different concepts. But it makes you wonder if decisions are made without fully weighing the consequences of those actions. What are the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth order effects of those decisions? So maybe this will stimulate some conversation. Maybe some of you will share this video, if not the other videos, and we can stimulate conversation, because ultimately I would like to hear back from some people. Me personally, yes, I would like to see gasoline below $2 a gallon. I don't know who wouldn't. Do I want to pollute the environment? No, I don't want to pollute the environment. I want to breathe clean air. All right, I want to drink clean water. I'm not an idiot. I comprehend those things. But where do we meet in the middle? Where can I get gas that's less than $2 a gallon or cheaper? Okay, and where can I also not pollute and or destroy the environment? Okay, I mean, and that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. And then the other hot topic issue is the whole gender thing. I personally believe in the two genders, male and female. If you're not somebody who partakes in that concept, that's fine. You be you. I don't personally care. You go and be you. If you want to be a transnational galactic trash panda, you be you. I don't care. I made a post where I had suggested that perhaps we're losing sight of common sense, as in something as a society we can all potentially agree on. Because even whether it's micro or macro, we're seeing things on the internet that have some semblance of truth, like the boys who were not as competitive in their gender-based sports, but when they decide to go female, now all of a sudden they're state level competitors and or state level champions, and perhaps at the collegiate level they may be national champions. And that's just because of people who want to deny certain fundamental facts where, at a genetic and biological level, males are different from females. Whether we have a greater propensity for testosterone, which makes us stronger and faster, so be it. Because I will also concur that I cannot get pregnant. I lack the physical genetic material to conceive a child and carry a child to term. You don't have to agree with these points of view. You don't have to like them, but get involved. Let's have the conversation. We can't start to meet in the middle if the left and the right don't attempt to talk to one another. And the main reason I bring this up, and the main reason I started doing a lot of these videos, is because when it comes to the subject of influence, and I've said this before, should people in a celebrity status, regardless of how that status came to be, why is it that so many of them tend to lean towards the left? Why is it that they seem to have more politically left-leaning ideologies? I don't know the answer to that. I could surmise, I could, you know, come up with reasons. What's the word I'm looking for? Not subjective, but speculation. There it is. I could speculate all day long, but the truth is I don't really know. The problem with that is if they're in a celebrity status, the potential for them to influence, whether that's a responsibility they shouldn't take lightly or whether they should maybe keep their opinions to themselves. And I'm trying to overcome my individual confirmation bias, because in the event there's a extreme minority celebrity who leans towards the right, I find it refreshing. But I don't think I've heard any celebrity just come right out and say, I'm in the middle, where I don't care as much about this, I don't care as much about that, I'm more concerned with this, I'm more concerned with that. So, I don't know. You know the deal. If you like the video, hit like. If you don't like the video, hit dislike. Feedback is feedback. More importantly, if you're in a position to do so, whether you're concerned about your work or other things, and that's why you can't leave a comment, I understand. If you're in a position to leave a comment, please leave a comment. Get involved in the conversation. Otherwise, saying the word unity is pretty hollow unless we actually try to work together and talk to one another. But, what do I know? I'm just a straight white male ginger, so that's all I got, America.